he was like saying, what are you doing? And I would say, yeah, I'm just taking too many Vicodins. I'm going to chill out. I put it on that. We went through a turmoil. Like I was trying to do business and real estate and stuff. And so we got in a big old fight, and I was like paranoid that he was stealing money, all this crazy stuff. And then I finally told him, and he was like, oh my gosh, this totally makes sense. You've been on meth. You've lost your mind, basically.
Holics.com, in partnership with Heartsupport and the Global Recovery Initiatives Foundation, is proud to present High Notes, a podcast about addiction and recovery in the music business. I'm your host, James Shotwell. My guest this episode is Brian Head Welch, one of the founding members of the multi-platinum Grammy Award-winning group KoRn, whose latest album, The Nothing, is available now wherever you get music. Brian is a guest that almost needs no introduction. He's an internationally recognized rock and roll musician who has released numerous albums, gone platinum, won Grammys, traveled the world, and can step on stage in virtually any country to find thousands of people who not only know his name, but can sing along to every single word of every song he plays on. He's truly in an elite position in the music business, and that level of success has allowed him to live out his wildest fantasies, and at one point, it almost ruined his life. In this episode, Brian is going to tell us about his journey to recovery and the role that religion played in it, but also what he's doing in the future. Because like many of our guests, Brian is determined to help other musicians live a better life, and he's going to tell us how he plans to do that in just a little bit. But to begin our conversation, he takes me back to the beginning. He takes me back to the night that changed everything in his life.
It was when I was in Germany, I think, and I ran out of drugs, meth, weed, and I had my dealer FedEx me meth from California all the way to Germany. Pretty much the beginning of the internet, 2004. It was right. It was just getting going. So maybe not the beginning. So you had the FedEx tracking and everything, and I watched the package go here and there and all these different, places. And I'm like, is it going to move or are they going to find it? Am I going to get busted? And so that's when I was like, I got to change. I have a daughter at home. I'm a single dad, and my parents are helping me watch her. I have nanny, full-time nanny. What happens? Then my parents, if I go to jail or something, then my parents have this kid and they're in their, probably mid-60s at that time. Not cool. That was a wake-up call.
Let's stop and think about this for a second. Head was so consumed with his addiction that he didn't think twice to have drugs shipped to him on tour in another country. That process would require the package to be reviewed by several inspectors, possibly even dogs, and he didn't think twice about it, at least not at first. So I was curious if he was ever worried that the United States would catch on to what he was doing. But he tells me it wasn't the United States he was worried about.
I was more worried about the other countries finding it, because that's a no-no. I mean, I went to Asia, bro. I went to Asia with meth packed in my suitcases and stuff. So we went to these countries that, like, if you brought anything in, that they can do anything. They can put you to death. They can put you in jail. It's like, so there was some really strict places in Asia. So I was scared.
It's weird when you get past that point in your life and you look back. You can almost be like retroactively scared. Like you realize how dire the position you put yourself in, but maybe at the time you didn't understand the gravity of it, but now you do. And like, it's like when you survive a car crash and you keep having flashbacks to it, you're like, that was terrifying. I didn't even realize what I was doing.
You're right. Yeah, totally. That's how it feels.
The decision to change your life is a scary one. All of a sudden, you choose to be a different kind of person who lives differently and makes different choices. And I wanted to know who Head confided in. On that night in Germany, when he was waiting for those drugs to arrive, and he decided he wasn't going to do them, who did he turn to, and what did they talk about?
So obviously the dealers knew. So that the two dealers I had, one was Bakersfield, California, one was Huntington Beach, California, and so they knew. That was it. Nobody else in my world at home or on the road or in the band or the crew or anybody knew what I was doing. I had this isolation secret. So the first person I told was one of my best friends at the time. His name was Donnie. I told him. It was like saying, what are you doing? I would say, yeah, I'm just taking too many Vicodins. I'm going to chill out. I put it on that. we went through a turmoil. Like I was trying to do business and real estate and stuff. And so we got in a big old fight, and I was like paranoid that he was stealing money, all this crazy stuff. And then I finally told him, and he was like, oh my gosh, that this totally makes sense. You've been on meth. You've lost your mind, basically. I was spun out. And so it made sense to him. He just encouraged me. Like it's funny because he wasn't a churchgoer or anything, but he encouraged me, like, go to church, and these crazy things were happening to me. And he was like, it looks like God's calling you, man. And he wasn't even like a believer. So it was pretty crazy.
Head took his friend's advice to heart and not long after left KoRn. He then found religion and began working on his own solo album and his first book, which both share the same title, Save Me From Myself. Anyone in recovery will tell you that one of the first steps to leading a better life is to admit that you need help, to ask others to help save you from yourself, because that's the only way to get better. And thanks to his writing and his music, Head has been able to encourage thousands, if not millions, of fans to take steps towards leading a better life. But it's not something that he likes to brag about or even gets a big ego over. It's just something he feels compelled to do.
Yeah, you know what? It's crazy because I hear it a lot, but I don't like dwell on it, because I know that I'm just grateful to be free, and my mission is to help people. And so I hear it all the time. And I'm just grateful to be able to, that it could have been different. I could have had a different ending to my story. So I just thank God that I'm able to help people and shine light on the problem, and to give people like the thought, if he can do it with all the free drugs and everything that he had coming in, if he can get past it, then I know I can. It gives people just that hope that guy probably partied worse than me than I've ever done in my life, and he quit, so I can quit.
We love little nuggets of wisdom here at High Notes, and Head has a great one. Not long after he got sober, he did an interview where he compared his addiction to eating hamburgers. Head says, if you eat a hamburger every single day of your life, eventually you're going to get sick of hamburgers.
Yeah, I lost the taste for it, and I think it has to do with a lot of just being over it. Steven Tyler said, sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so I just got sick of it. And so it's pretty simple. Alcohol to me equals, problems for me. Drugs equal massive problems for me. If I even drink a little bit, there's a price to pay. I get massively depressed. My body is rejects it. And my soul rejects it, even a little bit of alcohol. And so it's like, if I want to pay that price, but I've already paid the price, over and over. So the metaphor, like a, kid in a candy store, every day after school, he's get free candy. After a little while, he's going to be like, I don't want candy. It's you're going to get tired of it. And so yeah, I just, you come to a point where you want to feel good. You want to feel good inside and out. I do wish, I could have a couple drinks, but I can't stop. So I just have to stay away. And I'm to the point now, I'm so strong, there's people drinking around me all the time out on the road, Sometimes I'll just grab a beer and smell it and give it back to them. Be like, oh, I remember that. But that's it. So I'm pretty strong. I wouldn't recommend people doing that, especially if they're just obviously freshly sober.
What Head is describing here is incredibly relatable to anyone that's given up drugs or alcohol. From time to time, your brain will think, why don't we do it again? Just once. Because as we recall, we did enjoy it, at least for a time. Drugs and alcohol can be incredibly fun. But as people that have gone through the recovery process recognize, that fun never lasts. And sometimes what you need to do is to play it out. To say, okay, if I take one drink tonight, what's going to happen tomorrow and the next day? Will I be able to stop? And most often we realize, no, we won't.
Yeah, it's the price that you pay. Everything has a cost, right? But I wrote in my second book, it was like a part 2 to save me from myself. I was tired of not being able to just have a couple drinks, And so I was like, I can have some wine. In 2015, I started having some wine. And about a month into it, I was drinking the whole bottle. And then I was like, okay, well, this isn't for me because I'm already going up and, farther and drinking more and more. I'm going to have to quit, but I'll quit next month. And I was like, I haven't had a beer in a long time. So I started drinking beer and started drinking just everything. Actually, vodka, Jack Daniels. I just was like, I've stopped everything. And I'm just going to go have some fun, That led me to massive depression, and it was not good. And so, but I quit. So 15 years since I first quit, but I had a small hiccup. And I'm not one of those guys that starts over now and counts every day and every month and every year. Everyone's wired different, right? To me, in my mind, I'm already free, and I just had a hiccup along the road. And you can't let that, I hate the starting over thing. It's just like, oh, that was just a hiccup and now I'm back, That's not me anymore. And I tried to live like the old me, and that's not me anymore. And so it was just something that I went through that I learned, it was a lesson learned.
Absolutely. We actually had an intervention with a friend recently because they stopped talking about drinking a glass of wine. And one day we were talking and they said, I had 8 glasses of wine yesterday. And I was like, that's about 2 bottles. Like you have to start talking in bottles. You hit a problem. You know what I mean? It's just, we have to draw a line.
Yeah. And that's like dark purple teeth right there. 2 bottles. My gosh, his teeth must have been like dark purple, like my guitar I play.
So good.
Not
so
good.
Well to bring that back around. In early 2020, before the coronavirus pandemic hit, Head opened a new business with Dr. Matt O'Neill called Zavelle. It's a wellness center that has locations across America that is hoping to help musicians as well as everyday citizens lead better lives. And at this point in the interview, Dr. Matt joins us to discuss Zavelle, the rising pandemic, which at the time had just begun, and where they hope to take their business in the future.
Sobriety and, my spiritual life has been everything to me. It's just like, I feel like all that stuff is a counterfeit like I did before, because I get this feeling it's a real thing that I have with the spiritual life, and, I go around and I just want to help people. And so when I met Dr. Matt here, he's a physical therapist, and he just brought me out and we did I had solo shows at first, in Nebraska where he lived. And when I rejoined KoRn, we just kept in contact. And when I rejoined KoRn, he's like, oh, that's cool, because he's a metal fan and everything. And he would come out to shows and just hang out and be a friend and be a fan and just get to know everybody. And he would bring little exercise routines and everything on paper or whatever, and he would give them to Monkey, or give them to me and say, hey, try this before and after the show. And then we came to a spot where Jonathan really wanted a touring physical therapist to help him stretch and everything, and just to help him feel good every day. And so they asked him, he was out just hanging out with me one month and on the road, and they asked him, hey, what are you doing? And he's like, well, I got to practice at home. He's got a bunch of employees, a bunch of other physical therapists under him. And so he's a busy man. He decided to go on the road with us, and that's how that whole thing happened. And I'll throw him in there. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Matt O'Neill.
Now, the next voice you're going to hear is that of Dr. Matt, who's going to tell us about the origin story of Zavelle and how he feels it can help musicians everywhere lead better lives.
This is where it all originated from. It came out of my desire, my love for helping people and what I've done my entire career. But when I was out on tour, I'd never experienced anything like that before. I've always lived at home and obviously and worked, within the city that I had my clinic in. So, I pretty much lived and worked within a 3-block radius. And to go out on tour and to have the constant movement, the constant noise, just being the constant kind of abuse on the body and the mind out there, just leads to major exhaustion. And I only did it for, 3 months at a time, in a single stretch. I couldn't imagine doing it for 25 years. And so we were up in Toronto and I was just exhausted. I was angry, and it wasn't anything that was rational. It was simply that I wasn't getting good sleep, and that there was a monotony of each day, and I wasn't sure how to actually handle it. I couldn't fix my brain pain. I couldn't fix my spine pain, my body pain. It didn't matter what I did for exercises or anything. And I was just kind of helpless a little bit. And I'm like, we're out here for another 2 months. I got to get this together. And so I was willing to try anything that would help me. And I can really understand, at least in a minor point of view, why so many touring musicians turn to things that will numb them and that will kind of slow things down is because it's tough. It is tough with the monotony that's out there. And so I went and floated for the first time up in Toronto, and I came out an hour later, and I called my wife, Sarah, and said, I found the thing I've been looking for, because I fell asleep. And when I came out of the pod an hour later, my brain pain was gone. My spine pain was gone. Everything was gone. And I felt completely rejuvenated, completely renewed and restored. And it just freaked me out. And then, I met up with Brian later that night and was telling him about the experience. And he's like, yeah, totally. He's like, I've floated before. It's awesome. You're in a highly dense saltwater pod is what we utilize. And it's just like a big spaceship is what it looks like. And you're in there, and you float pretty much on top of the water is how dense that salt is. And it's in a sensory-less environment, right? It's not a true sensory deprivation tank. It's a sensory-less environment. So what I recommend is that people shut off the lights and the sound, and we put our environment to where the water, the air, and your skin temperature are all the same. And so what happens is your brain is actually able to shut off, almost like you're in a deep sleep state. But you can do it instead of just for 5 minutes at a time like you normally would in a sleep cycle. You can do it for hours at a time. And it literally dumps healing chemicals and hormones into your system to help heal your body and your mind during that entire hour. And when everybody comes out of the float pod, their first response is always, man, I feel like I slept for a week. Because that's truly what's happening to the brain, is it's releasing those things to heal you. And it's truly rejuvenating people's brains and bodies during that time. And so within a number of months of being off a tour, I had my first place open in Nebraska. And then within a couple months after that, I was out here in Nashville with Brian, and we just kind of started walking down this process to see how we could help people. And when we were talking about it, you're talking about recovery and addiction recovery and helping musicians and stuff like that. And what I saw out on tour is it's twofold. It's the musician that we need to help, but it's also the family at home that we need to help as well. Because if we only help the musician, we're only helping the people that are under the stress of being out on tour. But there's a whole other side of the family and the people that are at home that are missing their spouses, they're missing their parents, and they're struggling as well. And so what we want to be able to do is we want to help people on tour, but we want to help the family as well. And when we do that, then that's going to have a increased impact upon the people that are on tour, the crew, the musicians, everybody. And because when I was out on tour treating people, I didn't just treat band members. I treated crew. I treated staff members. Anybody that needed help, I would help. That's kind of the focus of this company.
Dr. Matt brought up a really good point about tour crews. There may be 5 people on stage performing, but there's probably 50 or more backstage making that show possible. From sound and lighting guys to tour managers, bus drivers, and catering, there are a lot of people required to make a tour successful, and the job of being on tour is incredibly stressful. It can take a toll on your mind and body, often in ways we don't expect.
Yeah. And it's really similar to the military, right? I liken, and there's a lot of correlations between just being gone. And that absence at a home is very, very impactful. None of us, because of how we're just wired, none of us ever have the best thoughts possible. We always go to worst case scenario, right? Always. And that just gets amplified out on tour. And it doesn't matter if you're new to the scene or you've been doing it for 40 years, 25 years like these guys and 40 years like my uncle. I mean, it's all the same. And it's something that definitely needs to be addressed.
Some of these modalities we have, they're for everybody. Just the other day, we had our first customer come into our Spring Hill, Tennessee location. She was a principal, and so it's just, there's so much stress in the world. There's so much go, go, go. And, we just need to stop and take some time to give something to ourselves that will help us regenerate everything, mentally, physically, and emotionally. And so that's what we're trying to do with this. We both love to help people. And so this is just a cool business to get in that can help people. And, and I think it's going to grow. And so we can open more and more of them.
Yeah, because, when you talk about addictions, if you ask somebody and they're truly honest with you and say, why do you take X, Y, and Z, or why do you drink? They're not going to say so I can get drunk. That's not their goal. Their goal isn't to get high. They're typically, what's triggering them is something else. They're bored, they're stressed, they're overwhelmed, they want to numb out. There's another reason why they're actually doing that thing. That thing is just the thing that gets them to that ultimate goal. And what has been shown through research is with the different modalities that we utilize, we can take somebody that has massive stress and anxiety, like clinical stress and anxiety, can't get out of the side of the house type of thing, and you can put them in a pod, and 60 minutes later when they come out, their stress and anxiety level is cut in half. And then within 2 times a week for 6 weeks, you can get them to baseline. So I was talking with a gentleman yesterday who was in the military for 8 years, and he's got PTSD and is being treated, and he's on a ton of different meds for stress and anxiety and depression, and his wife is as well because she got burnout while he was in the military. And I'm like, man, I just want to help you out. And he's like, I just want to get off the drugs. He just wants to feel normal again. And that's what we're doing. It's, like Brian said, it's a principal at a school. It's an elderly gentleman who hasn't touched his feet in 3 years because his back is so stoved up. It's somebody that just wants to be able to just kind of reset, and they want to sleep good again. Everybody has the reasons, but what we're trying to do is provide the solutions for those that actually work every single time, and that they build on themselves and work better and better. And then we add in the different things like our podcasts and stuff that I've talked to my patients about for 15 plus years. Sleep better? Cool. Listen to our podcast, and it's 2 hours on sleep and how you can improve that. You want to learn how to write goals or de-stress? Cool. Listen to that while you're doing these other things. And, it's not just a simple facet of we're going to be your new pill. That's not what we're doing. We're trying to provide the solutions for people to get them to where they want to go. One of our slogans that we use is Zivel or floating or cryo. It's a bridge between where you are and where you want to be. It's not your end all. It's a bridge.
Yeah, you're not trying to be like, here's the solution, just help people along the journey to wellness.
Absolutely, yeah. And one of our other slogans or phrases that we use is redefine health. We're not here to define health. I'm not here to tell you what you need to do or not do. I'm here to give you the solutions, or not solutions, but I'm here to give you a lots of information and how to apply it to your life, and you're going to find what works for you. The same workout that I do, Brian shouldn't be doing that workout. We're 2 different people. The same foods I eat, he shouldn't be eating. We're 2 different people. But we can all agree on what is healthy. We can all agree on what is best for sleep, and we can start to practice that. And when we do, you think about, if I can improve your life, then everyone that you come in contact with, hopefully you can improve their life as well. And it just continues to spread, almost like the virus that we're talking about that's spreading, right? I was reading today, the virus is spreading basically, it's like a 50% spread rate. So one person can spread it to 2.5 people. Okay, well, this thing is going to burn itself out eventually, hopefully with the different measures we're taking. But imagine if we could spread love that way. Imagine if we could spread health that way, that every single person that we come in contact with, or out of 10 people, we're making 2.5 of their lives so much better that they will become infected with positivity and hope, and then they can go and infect somebody else.
I need to point out that this episode of High Notes was recorded in March of 2020, shortly after the coronavirus pandemic hit and before the nationwide lockdown took effect. No one knew what was going to happen to Zavelle or any other small business at that time. All we could do is look to the future. So when Dr. Matt explains where they hope to go, please keep in mind that this was a pre-COVID era. We don't actually know what's going to happen in the future. We just do our best to plan as we're able.
Yeah, well, we're heading, we have Katy, Texas as well. That'll be open here in the next 2 months. And then we have a location that's going to be opening down in Macon, Georgia, and then back in Nebraska again. And then we're just expanding out from there. So we're in talks with people across the country. And the goal is to spread this throughout the country and then move around the world as well. We were asked a really important question before we really started this path about 1.5 years ago. And the question that was presented to Brian and I was, do we want to do this nationally or do we want to do this globally? And we really took the question seriously and thought about it, because it's a difference in undertaking and difference in scope. And we just came to the agreement that, you know what, if we can help as many people as possible, why not try? And so our goal is global expansion, because we want to be able to help as many people as possible.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. And you mentioned that you have a podcast too, right?
Yeah, yep, the Zavelle podcast. It's on the Apple platform right now.
Good. So anyone that's unable to get out right now, they can get out there. And what kind of things do you talk about on that show?
Lots of different stuff. I mean, the first one is just me explaining kind of where I came from and my motivations in life, what kind of drove me to this point. And then we talked about overcoming stress, life mapping or goal setting, self-awareness, how you kind of deal with a moment-to-moment basis of not getting so burnt out in your life, because that's really where addictions and bad stuff happens. Nobody is super rested, eating healthy, and living their best life possible, and then turn to drugs, right? It doesn't happen. What happens is we turn to things that harm us when we are at our most vulnerable, which is typically when we're exhausted, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So we talk about that. We talk about how to restart resolutions, how to sleep better, how to be happy, how to, your best nutrition, those types of things. And the goal is that we don't just give information, but we give application. I use this concept that I've used for years with my patients of, in our world, there's an explosion of information. I can literally grab my phone right now and Google anything that I want instantaneously. But we live in a world of a drought of application. How you apply that information you just got to your life to change your life and the lives of those people around you, that's what we're trying to do. And that's what we're trying to push out there through the podcast. And so right now we have 8 episodes, and we have a lot more that are recorded and that are in the works, and that we'll be releasing here probably during the shutdown, because it's a perfect time to be working on that stuff.
We make a conscious effort at High Notes to not use the word advice unless we absolutely have to. To give advice infers that you know something the other person doesn't. You know where they are, where they've been, and where they need to go. And that is so rarely the case when talking about recovery. So instead, we make suggestions. And I wanted to know, what did Dr. Matt and Head have to suggest for people caught in the pandemic who may be feeling isolated or stressed or tempted by their addictive behaviors?
They have an opportunity right now to improve their lives today, right? They don't have to wait until the world opens back up. They can change their sleep patterns today, right? And that's a key pivotal thing for me, is that one thing. If we can change that one thing, they can start exercise in their homes today. One of the things that this brilliant psychologist that I worked with, what he said, he would tell people, this is a little bit of a nugget for you at the end of this thing. If you want to change your world, change your perspective. So he would have somebody that was in severe clinical depression, and they would just sit there and just stare at the wall or stare at the TV all day long. And he would say he wouldn't change anything about him. All he would say was, stand up from the chair, walk across the room every hour, and sit in the other chair. And that simply moving somebody from one position to another, the different perspective on their TV, start to break them from that depression cycle. And I did that with my patient one time, and she came in and had all these issues going on, and it was everybody else's fault and all this other stuff. And I just said, listen, I said, we just got to get you to move. I said, move what you can, move when you can, and move how you can. Outside of that, we can't do anything else. And she came back a week later, and all of her spine pain was gone, and she had a smile on her face. And I'm like, what did you do? She goes, I did what you said. I just moved. So even in this quarantine, I don't sit in front of the TV and Netflix for 12 hours, right? Get up every show if you need to and move across the room. Look at your world from a slightly different perspective, and that will create this process to create change in your life.
I think the big takeaway from my conversation with Head and Dr. Matt is that there are always things we can do to improve our lives. Whether that's something big, like choosing to not drink or smoke, or little things, like getting more sleep, getting up earlier, or eating better. Every little step counts, and every little step puts us closer to the path to leading a better life. If you need help, or you know somebody that's caught in the struggle, please reach out. The entire High Notes team is here to help, and so are our partners. Heartsupport and the Global Recovery Initiatives Foundation have people who specialize in addiction and mental health that are waiting to hear from you. So please, do not feel alone because you're not. We are here for you, and we want to help you. As always, my name is James Shotwell. High Notes is brought to you by Holics.com. The show is produced and edited by Landon Defever, with theme music from the band You, Me, and Everyone We Know. The artwork for our show was created by the great Nick Ferran. If you would like to connect with High Notes, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram by looking for High Notes Pod. That's High Notes POD. There are more episodes coming soon, so please stick around. We'd love to have you.